helping my sister plan her wedding, and it's unbelievable what a big business this has turned into. With the flowers, musicians, and the photographer. It took us days just to find the right multi-tiered wedding cake.
You know, there's an intriguing story about the origin of the wedding cake. It has to do with the Roman Empire and Anglo-Saxons, even a small church off Fleet Street in London.
Really? How are they all connected?
Well, I'll tell you, and it's a fun story with lots of twists and turns along the way. The wedding cake first appeared in ancient Rome, but only among the upper classes. It involved the bride and the groom eating a small cake. Now, this cake was made out of salt and water and flour, and it symbolized prosperity and fertility. They'd take the cake and they'd break it over the bride's head.
Lovely.
But what the guests would then do is they would get on the ground and they'd pick up pieces of the cake and eat it, the feeling being that it would give them prosperity.
Huh. Can we just stop for a second? People are walking past here. People from London walk past the Tower of London every day. Being from Chicago, the oldest thing we have there is the water tower.
There's an interesting parallel too. The water towers in Chicago survived the Great Fire because they're made out of stone. The reason we can see the Tower of London today is because it was made of stone as well. Most of the early 11th and 12th century castles were built out of wood, and they're no longer in existence.
Now, does this actually have anything to do with the wedding cake story?
No, it doesn't. The reason we're here is because I want to take you around the corner and show you something that's almost 1,000 years older than this, and it does relate to the wedding cake.
Oh, let's go look.
Come on.
Okay.
Beginning in the 1st century A.D., the Romans took their custom of the wedding cake, and they brought it to the far reaches of their empire, including here in Britain. This is a piece of the old Roman wall.
Oh my gosh. And we could still walk right up to it and touch it. Now, this is 1,000 years older than the tower, so they had to build this in 100, 200 AD?
That's right, about 200 AD. And if you think about it, the Romans were living here in Britain longer than we've been settled in the United States.
Oh my gosh.
Now, in about the 5th century, the Roman Empire starts to collapse. And here in Britain, the Romans are replaced by the Anglo-Saxons, who were pretty tough cookies. The Angles and Saxons started establishing kingdoms all over the country, and it was now called Anglo-land, or simply England.
Why not Saxon land or Anglo-Saxon land?
You know, I haven't the slightest idea. We should check that out.
Yeah.
The Saxons came up with a variation of the Roman cake. Each guest had to bring a biscuit, and they'd put it in a big heap on top of the wedding table.
Now, are they still breaking biscuits over the bride's head, or have we matured a little bit yet?
No, not yet. But a new tradition came in. If the bride and the groom could kiss over the pile, it was an omen for their future happiness.
Finally, some romance in the story.
Exactly. That was it for the Saxon contribution to the wedding cake, or much of anything else. They were conquered by the Normans at what became the most famous battle in English history. In fact, you know, we're not very far from where it took place. I just got to show it to you.
Cool, let's go check it out.
We're in the town of Battle, and this is Battle Abbey. Construction began here in 1066 to commemorate a very famous battle. Can you guess which one?
Well, sure, 1066, that would be the Battle of Hastings. The Normans invade England, William the Conqueror.
You know, he was also called William the Bastard. The Saxons
Well, hold on a second, I'm confused. If it's the Battle of Hastings, why aren't we in Hastings?
Because the battle took place here, but we're in a region called Hastings, and over the centuries the name caught on. You can picture the Normans massing at the bottom of that bluff. They're coming up the hill, on horse and on foot. The Saxons are all lined up here. The Normans charge, the Saxons pull back. It's going to be a rout. The Normans slaughter them. Last line of defense here. A group of Saxons and their king, Harold, who also happens to be William's cousin. They're slaughtered as well. According to tradition, Harold gets it in the eye with an arrow. But let's get back to the wedding cake. We need to go back in time and bring in another piece to the puzzle. In Ireland in 453 AD, a future saint was born. Her name was Bridget.
So how does St. Bridget fit into the story?
Well, she became so famous as a holy person that they started naming churches after her in England, like this one. Only they used her nickname, St. Bride. Now, the church was built on top of old Roman ruins and an Anglo-Saxon cemetery.
Two of our early cake cultures.
Right.
But how did we get the modern wedding cake out of Roman ruins, Saxon biscuits, and St. Bride?
It all started to come together after the Great Fire of London in 1666. They needed a master architect to rebuild the city.
Oh, that would be Sir Christopher Wren.
That's right. Now, he's basically associated with the rebuilding of St. Paul's Cathedral right here. But he also rebuilt a lot of the churches that burned down, including St. Bride's. Some were never rebuilt, and there are markers throughout the city to show us where they once stood.
Oh, so people obviously still found ways to get married and pile up their biscuits.
Yep, and they even found ways of putting stuff inside the biscuits. There was one recipe that called for oysters and sweetbreads and onions and bacon.
Oh, ugh. Oh, that sounds so awful. Did they get sick from that?
Well, if they did, they weren't talking about it.
I bet not.
But here's what happened. King Charles II brought a chef over from France who saw this pile of biscuits at the wedding, and he was completely appalled by it. So he decided to do something.
Anything had to be an improvement.
Yeah, and the French were terrific dessert makers. What he did was he decided to put icing all over the biscuits, except for your favorite one on the top, which was still used to be broken over the head of the bride.
Why mess with tradition?
Yep.
What an annoying tradition anyway.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Anyway, bakers were soon being asked to just bake the entire cake, rather than put a bunch of icing all over these biscuits. And you'll be happy to know that the bride no longer had a biscuit bopped over her head. It just went out of fashion.
My sister will be so relieved. Now, something tells me that it was in a bakery shop that everything finally changed.
Yep. In the 18th century, in a bakery off Fleet Street, we're told about a baker who decided he wanted to take a different approach to this French wedding cake. And he found one by just looking outside his window. Remember, Christopher Wren completed St. Bride's Church in 1675. While the baker was preparing his dough, he looked out his window and he saw this magnificent 234-foot steeple rising high above London. And suddenly the idea came to him in a flash. Why not make a layered wedding cake, just like the steeple of St. Bride's Church? It was as if 2,000 years of tradition came together all at once. The rest, you might say, is history.
So that's the first time the modern wedding cake appeared.
Primus Tempus.